This is the Burj Khalifa last week. Who recognizes these colors? It's of course the Parisian colors, a physical beacon in the Middle East in a heavily Islamic country, symbolically showing solidarity with a Western nation. Humanity has always tried to be better than itself, whether it's through physical triumphs like the tallest building in the world, the largest malls, the greatest amusement parks. Yes, by the way, all three of those are in Dubai and the UAE, for now at least. But more challengingly, we've tried to surmount our inner constraints. Regardless of who you read, whether it's Elon Musk, the largest longitudinal study in history, Ericksonian developmental theory, or Lockean developmental theory, they will all tell you that as a species, as humanity, our single greatest challenge is self-actualization and projection. In other words, how do you deliver the meaning of life to people faster and more deeply? It is incredibly difficult to derive meaning in yourself and in others in 2015, and far more challenging for your children and theirs after that. There are incredible practical pressures of financials, academia, in the workplace, as well as societal pressures that make taboos and keep taboos as taboos. Luckily, content has always been a way for us to explore and express who we truly are in the physical world and the far freer digital world. I may not be an astronaut, or frankly never be an astronaut, because my name does not rhyme with Melon Musk, but I can absolutely ride shotgun in Star Wars X-Wing. I may also never be a leading musician or vlogger, but I can absolutely have Justin Bieber's incredible haircut. Content has always enabled us to express who we truly are. This has been further sort of exponentially grown in the past 5 years through 4 different trends. The first is we as human beings have always been nuanced people. For instance, I don't just love R&B music, I love 2 derivations. I love Jodeci, which, does anyone love Jodeci? Oh, there we go. People love real R&B music. Jodeci, for the uninitiated, is real R&B music. And on the other side of the spectrum, I love Chris Brown, the music, not the man, which, depending on who you are, Chris Brown is truly not R&B music. Second is broadband connectivity, and the proliferation of devices has enabled us to get access to the things that we love. Third, and you all know this far better than anyone in the world, but export and import, the world growing smaller, has created incredible new cultural contexts that have made us more connected than ever. And finally, social content networks like Facebook, like YouTube, and so forth have further compartmentalized free expression, and by virtue of that, distribution. One of the greatest catalysts of this entire movement was, and of course still is, YouTube. We really started investing in YouTube content creators about 5 years ago. Within fewer than 5 years, YouTube has become the world's largest and most engaged stage, more than 1 billion viewers across 60 different countries. Moreover, it's enabled an incredible ecosystem of enterprises, last year alone getting venture capital investment of more than $680 million, twice that of the previous year. And as you just heard from Chairman Donat, in so many countries, YouTube-born, digitally born stars are the new wave celebrity, despite not being known fewer than 5 years ago. We spent millions of dollars and hours and time and headaches and tears and all sorts of emotions to try to determine, how do you elevate a digitally born creator? How do you create this now multi-billion-dollar industry? And we found that it always boiled down to 2 common sensibilities, which you see on the bottom 2 quadrants. First is content, and the second is community. And we see those 2 trends further propelling us forward in the next 5 years and hopefully the next decade. So I'd like to share very briefly what we at Victorious, as well as what we found at YouTube, to be some of the greatest trends propelling this digital native ecosystem forward. First, who recognizes this young man? This is Ryan Higa. Ryan is the less better looking version of Dom Lau. But more importantly, is the most subscribed to comedian in the world on YouTube. He, in contrast to his TV and film counterparts, though, is not a conventional star. He's not classically trained in acting or singing, and candidly, he's not white either. In our home country in the United States, fewer than 3% of faces on television look like Ryan's and mine. And yet, despite that, on platforms like YouTube, more than 15% of the top 50 most subscribed to channels are powered by people that look like us. This means that big niches, whether it's demographically based, interest-based, or proximity-based, are suddenly being given rise. It means that instead of viewership just going to the head content or blockbusters, it's suddenly migrating down to the torso and the tail. We see this in other industries as well, in music, for instance. In several countries, indie label and indie musician market share has grown over the past 5 years. In the States, the largest music labels has actually dropped in the last 3. Now, that, of course, is not to say that an indie label musician in my backyard is making as much money as the incredible tear-inducing Adele. But it is to say that nuanced passions are suddenly becoming more prominent among our consumers. This, by the way, is not a new phenomenon. In 2009, early on, Netflix realized that out of its 60,000 titles, more than 2/3 of daily content viewed was actually from the torso and tail. It wasn't from those blockbusters. It was from the body. You see this in other big niche examples, from Drama Fever and Crunchyroll and K-drama and anime. You see this in electronic dance music, so forth and so on. The second trend is mobile-first format. Of course, niche did not become broad, sort of mainstream on its own. It needed that access. On average, human beings check their smartphones about 160 times every single day because we have no lives. When you look to the mobile generation, millennials and Generation Z, they would actually rather give up their phone than give up their sense of, they'd rather give up their sense of smell than give up their phone. This, of course, tells us two things. A, they're idiots, because B, if you give up your sense of smell, you also lose your sense of taste. But it demonstrates the notion, nonetheless, of how vital this format is. As you just heard from Jasper, so many are investing in mobile video because it's cool and sexy, and we love taking sight, sound, and motion in our pockets. But the reality is that photos and images are shared and created and consumed far more than videos are worldwide. And so the mobile-first format will continue in some capacity to be video, but I think increasingly interesting will actually be more image and text-based. Witness the My Story campaign from Instagram. Instagram commissioned multiple digitally born stars to create a 9-part series, a Spider-Man murder mystery. It did incredibly well for them. It was also incredibly creatively liberating because it effectively was a new generation comic strip. Next is phoenixing. One of the dirty little secrets, and I'm sorry YouTube for sharing this, one of our dirty little secrets in the world is that on platforms like YouTube, the majority of content that's viewed on any given day is not new. It's over a year old. So while everyone and their mother is investing in the sexiest, shiniest new web series, the reality is it is old content that is interesting. Phoenixing content for the future means repackaging content from the past. And there is no one globally that does this better than BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed harnesses the crowd's old content and repackages it in 3 different ways. First is by passion and interest. For instance, you and I may love Justin Bieber and far more importantly, his haircut. Can we see a list of 30 things of how he's done his hair over the last decade? I'm getting a lot of dull faces from that one. You guys do not like Justin Bieber, huh? Because you like Marcus Butler and Alfie, of course. Second is by proximity. Are we in the same geolocation, therefore we have some similarities? Are we in Singapore together and can we enjoy the vibrance of the city? And third is temporality. Is it New Year's and can I enjoy something new from the time? Fourth is crowdsourced curation. In this day and age, content is not king, the crowd is. People vote with their views. We see this to be the case on the Victorious platform, where we power superfan communities for the world's biggest creators, and yet despite that, 95% of content created and consumed on our platform is UGC. This is not a new phenomenon either, by the way. Reality TV, the last great television format innovation, knew this very well. Whether it's through shows like Survivor or The X Factor, television understood how you harness an average person in daily life and repackage them into something incredibly premium and incredibly commercial. There are effectively a couple ways that you can think about curation. In its simplest form, curation is, of course, aggregating existing content. This is Instagram celebrity, the Fat Jewish. That's not being offensive. That's his real name because he's offensive. He effectively just aggregates different jokes from around Instagram. I think far more interesting, though, is curative gestalt. In other words, how do you harness the crowd to collectively create something new and standalone and therefore slightly more interesting? There are two ways you can think about this. The first is creator-produced, and the second is, of course, crowd-produced. On the creator side, we see incredible new media companies like Jukin Media that owns the famous YouTube channel Fail Army, where they'll package human fails or human wins, or pet fails or pet wins, and produce incredible premium TV shows across the world, as well as a top 50 YouTube channel. Secondly is, of course, content that's collaboratively created from the crowd. I think by far the most interesting innovation recently of this is Snapchat Stories. Snapchat Stories effectively empower average fans to gather together and create something new again, usually in 3 different parameters as well. The first is temporality. You and I may be in the same place for the World Cup at the same time. How can we collectively create that experience together? Second is by interest. You and I may love talking about love because we're soft in December, and therefore we can create cool content together about our first kiss or other things that just emasculated me. And then third, once again, is proximity. Are we in the same place because of the geodetection on our phones, and can we create content together finally? And then finally in content is what I call universe building. The most lucrative content franchises in history are not TV shows, they are not films, they are continuous multimedia content universes. Star Wars, James Bond, Harry Potter. These are films that become TV shows, that become consumer products, that become site-based entertainment, that become restaurants that make you very poor as a parent. They are universes. Instead of investing in individual web series, there are multiple benefits to this. First and foremost is if you invest in a single linear web series, you face the same cold start marketing and bitter end problem that every ephemeral content property does. What happens after episode 8? Second is in a multi-platform world, trying to navigate through everything is incredibly challenging and expensive. Producing and investing in holistic multimedia universes enables you to streamline your production costs so you can be everywhere more often. And third, by virtue of that, you cannot be in all places regardless of how you try for your consumers, especially given the transience of them on the mobile generation as well as on mobile devices. So producing something much more holistic across multiple platforms, being pervasive, enables you to often more times be present than when you are not. Now, all this said, there is a school of thought that says Burger King is delicious. I'm joking. There is a world that said providing access to content is more important than actually having assets themselves. In other words, there's a world that believes community building and owning an audience is far more powerful than owning content. So what are the trends we've seen here? The first, of course, is zero-click access. This is about a race to disintermediate access between consumers and the creators that love them. This is best analogized, I think, through something that we observed at Google. You'll see on the top, Google began as a search engine because to date, that was your principal entryway into the web. But if you ask yourself, what is the level one layer deeper, Inception style, from the search engine? It's, of course, the browser that you're searching on. Then one step further, what's the step beyond the browser? It's the operating system you're on. Enter Chrome OS and Android. And yet one step further, what is the layer beyond the actual OS that you're on? It's the actual connectivity that you have through platforms like Google Fi or Fiber, formerly known. So we analogize that to how content is consumed today. I distinctly remember in 2011, we realized that more members of the mobile generation were watching online videos video than we're watching linear television. Why? Because you cannot take your television everywhere you go. Secondly, though, we all know laptops are incredibly bulky no matter how thin Apple makes them. So can you take a mobile device with you more easily and take it out of your pocket more easily? This, of course, is now evolving into the wearable ecosystem, because even if you have a mobile phone, taking it out of your pocket is one click and clicking on it is a second. It is 2 clicks to own a mobile phone. Having a wearable like this enables you to just have one flick of a wrist. It is 1 click. This naturally evolves into more places where you can more easily gather content. This is where eyepieces start to become interesting. 90% of the content that we consume every single day throughout our lives is from these 2 things right here. Or I think most of us have these 2 things right here. Who knows? The world is mystical. And at some point, no longer will you have to have a physical device on your head, but instead, you'll be able to leverage cultural and collective context around you that will mold to your own interests. The second trend that we see is Pareto's principle. This is the 80-20 rule. Years ago, Marriott hotels realized that 20% of their visitors were driving 80% of their sales, which is why they tripled down in their rewards program. It is far, far, far easier to get the minority that is highly engaged to be more engaged than it is to take the casual fans and make them somewhat more engaged, period. We see this across most major social networks as well, whether it's YouTube or Facebook. It's always the minority that drives the majority of engagement. So how do you engagement beyond just a view or a click or a comment? We think there are 3 ways to do this that got cut off. But the first is access. How do you provide incredible access between the creator and their fan? This is where platforms or engagement mediums like live streaming become incredibly interesting. Second is status. How do you enable them to have recognition, whether it's physically or virtually, that makes them feel not just like a fan, but as a super fan or a tastemaker inside the community? This is especially vital for the mobile generation that is full of show-offs. And then finally is experience. Experience means providing an incredible both content as well as physical digital good experience, something that money simply cannot buy, something that's incredibly memorable. Third is superfan communities. Does anyone recognize this? This is known as a brony, B-R-O-N-Y. It's one of the unfortunate men of the world who enjoy My Little Pony. Superfan communities are the new fans. They're incredibly engaged not only with the creator or the content IP they love, but far more importantly, with other strangers who have a similar passion. We see this on the Victorious platform, where we've already forged tens of millions of relationships across just casual or super fans for various topics or YouTube stars. This we know matters, and we know these relationships are real because we have empirical proof that the mobile generation believes that digital relationships matter just as much, if not more, than in-person relationships. Fourth, I don't need to tell you this, but the importance of exporting and importing. 60% of a YouTube uploader's content's audience comes from outside of the uploader's origin country. Moreover, the second most prolific producer of premium content in the world is not here, it's not in India, and it's certainly not the United States. It's in Lagos, Nigeria. It's Nollywood, partly because 16% of the African diaspora is Nigerian. We also see incredible import opportunities. The most engaged city in the world on Twitter is Jakarta. The most engaged country in the world per capita on Instagram is Thailand. Incredible opportunities to identify new synergistic opportunities across cultures, across languages, and across passion. And finally, and this is at once the most qualitative and subjective, but by far the most interesting, is purpose. There are so many different social networks that one has to navigate in 2015 and increasingly in 2016. How do you know which to prioritize and program? The surest way to do this is to represent something that is greater than yourself, so that even when you are not physically or digitally aligned with your consumer, they somehow will still feel a piece of you inside of them when you're gone. And your audience, by the way, demands this. The mobile generation, again, millennials and centennials, are spoiled, self-entitled, and raised by many people in this room, no offense. Post-World War II momentum created more global superpowers in the following 4 decades than were created in the last 2 centuries combined, period. That led to incredible political, economic, and social mobility, witnessed the rise of the middle class. This sense of optimism, this sense that we can, in theory, do anything, was imbibed by our parents and imbued into each of us. And therein lies the fundamental problem. Because what happened, despite this balanced potential, is that over the past few years, we've seen global youth unemployment rise at a disproportionately higher rate than it did for our predecessors. The year that I graduated university in 2009 was the height of the economic recession for the United States. 200% more of my peers were unemployed when they graduated. Suddenly, the world that we were promised, of promise, of optimism, of tall buildings, didn't seem to actually exist. Suddenly, Brandon Matters comes back. Suddenly, you find, there we go. Suddenly you find that a quarter-life crisis when you're 25 has become something of the midlife crisis, and it's incredibly challenging. This is why you read so much of the mobile generation has gone through clinical depression more than any previously. They are obsessed, we are obsessed with finding meaning in our own lives because so many of our foundations have been rocked. And this obsession encapsulates every single thing that we consume. Who recognizes this young lady? This is Talia Joy Castellano. Talia was 7 when she was diagnosed with neuroblastoma, which is an unfortunately, relatively speaking, common form of childhood cancer. If you've been touched by cancer in any capacity, raise your hand. It should actually be most of you by the numbers. It's incredibly unbearable to imagine your child, your sister, your brother with cancer. Needless to say, if this person were yourself. Despite this disease, when Talia was 11, she did the last thing that any cancer patient would do. She started showing the world her weakness, and she started uploading to YouTube. Her very first video amassed more than 30,000 views. So the last thing any of you would probably expect she would do, she had created a beauty channel. That first video was called Crazy Eyeliner, and of course, everyone thought she was crazy to do it. But by the time she turned 12, Talia had amassed an audience of more than 700,000 subscribers from all around the world, all cheering her on through her 3 bouts of cancer, her video diaries, and most importantly, her beauty tutorials. Talia is a phenomenon because she is a niche of a niche of a niche. She is not just uploading to YouTube. She's not just a beauty guru. She's not just a makeup guru. She is a terminally ill child who does all of the above. And yet, despite this, everyone watches her and loves her. Ellen DeGeneres christened her as an official cover girl. Michelle Phan, the undisputed queen of digital beauty, christened her as an honorary digital sister. We lost Talia 2.5 years ago when she was 13. The day after she passed away, a video was uploaded posthumously to her channel by her older sister. Talia had written a bucket list just a few days before. This is it. What I love about this list is that it is so much of one young person. It has everything from putting a secret on a balloon and letting it float away to hanging out with the youngest Kardashian sisters, so for better and worse. To this day, her fans and her community are still swarming her channel and completing her bucket list. They're taking filtered photos, they're uploading videos, and they're checking what others have checked off the list. And because of this incredible momentum, this incredible community of fans and strangers, as of this afternoon, Talia has more than 1.4 million subscribers after death. We hear that the mobile generation, millennials and centennials, believe that digital relationships matter just as much, if not more, than in-person relationships, that some inane, annoying digital star with questionable production quality could somehow manifest who we each are as a human being. And we, of course, laugh and roll our eyes. And then we meet people like Talia, who lives through nothing more than a screen, her voice, and the people who carry it. Content has always enabled us to explore and express who we fundamentally are. Niche content enables us to articulate ourselves in ways we never could. Superfan communities, these networks of pure strangers, have become safe beacons where there may not be one outside of our doorstep. These strangers, they sing like Bombay, they film like Lagos, and they scream like the motivators of Bethany Moda. They turn islanders like Ryan Higa into icons, brands like HP into true foundational beliefs, and they help a stranger whom you and I will never meet named Talia Joy, giving her a very, very real tomorrow. We cannot change how we begin in life, but we can absolutely change the world that we inhabit. And there is no world and no industry in the world that touches people more frequently and impactfully than the one that we collectively rest in. And that is the reason it matters most. It is digital, it is entertainment, and it connects, of course, us all. And why does this matter? As one author once said, because the two most important moments of your life are, first, the day you were born, and the second, the day you find out why. Thank you. And with that, please welcome the legend, the myth, the best-looking Asian man in this room, Dominic Lau.
Wow.